Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Tim Klauser, with the Center Square's Western Washington reporter, Spencer Pauly, here to talk about one of his recent stories. Allegedly, the city of Seattle's immigration office is about to expand next year. By how much? Spencer says up to 60%. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about why the mayor is potentially proposing to expand funding by so much, and what exactly this office does?
Sure. So the Seattle Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, they work to provide any kind of support to the immigrant refugee community. It is one of the city's smaller departments. So this year they've been given about $6.4 million, right? That's a good chunk of change, but compared to the other departments, it's not much. But Mayor Harrell is proposing adding $4 million to the office for next year. And the reason is to protect these programs amidst federal funding cuts from the Trump administration. Now, Tim, we've talked about this how many times about basically Seattle just not parting ways with their sanctuary city policies among the rhetoric being used against them in the federal government, right? So earlier we saw Border Czar Tom Homan talk about expanding operations in Seattle because they're a sanctuary city. They're not complying with federal enforcement. And that's part of Seattle's don't ask policy that they've established since 2003. And basically what this does is bars city employees from inquiring about someone's immigration status. And now we're seeing basically Seattle doubling down with the $4 million to just expand staffing capacity and any kind of support they give. Now, I'm talking, when I say support, we're talking legal services and job training and English language training for these people. Now, that's where we're at right now. The budget is set to be announced later today as we're recording this Tuesday. And then, so we'll see the $4 million on top of everything else the mayor is proposing in the 2026 budget.
And this proposal is allegedly going to come out later today. It has this immigration office, or I'll call it that, funding expanding by 60%. I mean, $4 million. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket compared to Seattle's, I believe, multi-billion-dollar budget over 2 years. But it's not like it comes without impact. I mean, at the same time, I believe, according to your reporting, the city's also facing a $143 million budget deficit. So, I mean, in expansion and funding for this office only adds on to that amid pressures from the federal government that are undoubtedly impacting funding. I mean, I report on the city of Spokane County. And I mean, the city of Spokane is facing impacts from its stance on immigration. I mean, it's kind of passed similar policies that have been allegedly called the sanctuary policies. But that's exactly what the federal government is saying. Look, don't pass these. And if you are going to pass them and you're not willing to take them down, then you're going to face the loss of DOJ funding and these other federal grants, which it's interesting to see Seattle kind of reaffirm their situation and their stances on immigration, and at the same time expanding these offices. Meanwhile, Tom Homan is saying, look, we're coming back in Seattle harder than we were before.
And Tim, this is what it is about, is you're seeing this back and forth here between the federal government and Seattle. I'm sure assuming other sanctuary cities like San Francisco, Portland, etc. But you mentioned it. Seattle is facing this $143 million budget deficit. Now, city is proposing a business and occupation tax restructuring to bring in new additional revenue. And there's expected to be a new sales tax proposal that was allowed by the state earlier this year. Now, Seattle hasn't enacted that yet, but they're planning to bring in some more revenue to the city. Now, this could help with the budget deficit, but what you're seeing at the federal level is, we're talking the DOJ department, where they're making these sacrificial cuts to just cut spending altogether amid inflating costs and budgeting. Seattle, we're seeing more and more taxes and more increases to departments, including the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. Now, some would say, shouldn't Seattle just comply? But what Seattle has said since the beginning of the Trump administration is we will not comply to these policies that do not go along with our city beliefs, is I think the word they use. So, that doesn't speak for everyone in Seattle, but that is what at least the mayor is saying is the majority of Seattle. Now, this is something I'm going to report on later this week, but we're starting to see ICE ads targeting Seattle law enforcement, where it's an ICE ad saying, "Attention Seattle law enforcement, you're working for a city that has sanctuary policies when you could go after immigrants who are committing felonious acts, just committing crime." And so this is back and forth where you're seeing now the mayor's like, well, I'm going to add funding to our Office of Immigration and Refugee Affairs. And now ICE is saying, well, how about we just recruit your police officers amid your own police staffing shortage? So it's just this interesting battle that keeps going back and forth as the months go on.
Yeah, it's quite the game of tug of war. I mean, right in the middle is Seattle taxpayers. And I know you said, look, the majority of Seattle might say, look, the mayor's pushback, his non-compliance with the Trump administration's orders, I mean, that might align with the majority of the city of Seattle's values. But at the same time, that non-compliance, if it results in the loss of federal funding, it's going to be those same people and everyone else that does align with the Trump administration that are going to have to pick up that burden. I mean, whether it be through raising taxes even further than they may be proposing to cover an even larger deficit if they lose more federal funding, or through the loss of services if they can't afford to raise taxes, and therefore you see the loss of these services, whether it be in the immigration office or these public facing departments. I know you reference a little bit of data in your reporting, specifically around the amount of individuals that might have been deported. Can you speak a little bit on that and kind of the situation that we're seeing in Seattle, like you said, as these ads are being played, trying to recruit Seattle police officers for ICE?
So I think what you're talking about is the one graph in my story, and this is about the people have been deported by ICE in King County, where Seattle lies. And so this is data that's not really readily available. So what I was given the statistics from an earlier King County committee meeting about the topic of immigration efforts and how King County itself is going to work to protect their own undocumented citizen population. And so what they said is that at least 75 people in King County have been deported by ICE in the first 6 months of 2025. And that's 75 people. That isn't, necessarily a majority of the population. There are thousands of people who are, undocumented or just immigrants living within King County and Seattle. And so we're seeing 75 people, and we have to assume that these are criminals that ICE is going after, but the rhetoric we keep hearing nonstop is people in Seattle are worried that, any kind of immigrants are just getting picked up off the streets by ICE and being deported. But I think it's not so black and white, right? And that's what we're seeing here in Seattle and continuing. And we have to look back over the summer, Tim. We've had these protests from the LA protests that trickle down into Seattle here. We're constantly seeing just this back and forth between the Seattle public and ICE. And I think it's going to continue as long as Seattle continues to adhere to its own don't ask policies and the federal immigration continues to go after Seattle and other sanctuary cities, right? And that's just what we're going to see in the future here.
Yeah, I know we've seen a few examples in Washington and plenty across the nation of where maybe say people that enter the country legally or haven't committed any violent crime are being swept up into these mass deportations. But at the same time, largely across the entire country, you see these daily reports from DHS and ICE and these other agencies saying what these people that they're deporting, what they're accused of, crimes that they've been convicted of in the past, not only in the U.S. and otherwise. But you're definitely going to hear a bit of each narrative, especially when you're living in Seattle. You might kind of hear the left's narrative more amplified as opposed to, say, being in DC, where it's a majority Republican right now.
Right.
But definitely something we'll continue to keep our eyes on, and especially as the mayor's budget rolls out, potentially even later today or this week. But Spencer, we appreciate your coverage on this. And for anyone else wanting to catch more of Spencer's coverage, you can read it at thecentersquare.com. But otherwise, thank you for joining us for another episode of Washington in Focus.